Haydn was no stranger to folk music. Its influence on his compositions can often be heard. This Gypsy dance, which you'll find in issue 71 of the Pianist magazine, is a simple but effective piece and introduces us to one of the first pieces in this beginner's set of videos that tackles speed. When practicing anything that requires more fluidity, the principle is a fairly logical and simple one for me. If you can play a passage or an entire piece at one speed, but not at a faster speed, then there is obviously a technical or mechanical problem that needs to be identified and rectified. The challenge of the course is tracking that problem and finding the solution. Now, such problems may include unsure fingering, or slow hand positioning, even lack of finger contact with the keys, and so on. Sometimes you may even be dealing with a psychological issue. You know there's a difficult passage coming up and you're starting to panic and tense up. These kind of problems aren't so obvious at slower speeds, but start to show up as things get faster. If we look at the right hand, just the opening two bars, you might find your performance is a little uneven. Perhaps your fourth and fifth fingers are causing problems, maybe overlapping or a certain unevenness. The muscle connection between these two fingers often causes problems for many students. We now need to slow this passage down and deal with the right hand. Now, how do we overcome these problems? Well, of course, slow practice is essential to begin with, but this practice needs to increase in speed eventually. For even semiquavers and accuracy, it's worth breaking down the sections into mini exercises. For example, try a quaver followed by a semi-quaver triplet feel in your right hand and make sure your fingers are in contact with the keys at all times. So, or try a dotted semiquaver feel like so. And try these exercises with different touches, staccato, legato, but focus on these fingers 3, 4, and 5. So by the time you've covered these exercises, you should find the execution of these passages much easier. But remember, stay relaxed at all times. The right hand at bar 7 to 8, you may also find difficulties with the thumb movement. Try another exercise that puts your thumb to work. Put emphasis on the wrong notes, for example. We're looking to play effortlessly these groups of notes, maybe in groups of 4 or 8, so that eventually there's a feeling of almost just throwing these notes away. In the next section from bar 9, we come across some tricky repeated notes. You'll see here that these repeated notes might get problematic the faster we get, especially the semiquaver. Switching fingers on repeated notes may at first seem a little unnecessary, but this will eventually allow the hand more freedom of movement and help the wrists from tightening up, which is essential at speeds. For example, if we try these 4 bars like so, now compare the hand movement with a non-switched fingering version. Could you see how little my hand moved in the last example? With the switched fingered version, the hand movement could flow. Now, of course, it's good to have the hand position in place, but this little movement in the hand allows the muscles to breathe, if you will, and it keeps the hand from tensing up. You may, of course, prefer to play the other option, which is fine, but I'm just pointing out potential difficulties you may encounter and why they might occur. Now, the left hand plays a very subservient role in this particular piece. Keep it clean and precise. Try focusing a little on the rare moments that it may have something to say. For example, at bar 3 and 4, bring out the top line for a bit of interest. Also, at bar 8, provide support for the dynamic range of the mezzo forte. So you might like to add a little pedal too at this point, seeing as there is little need for it elsewhere. Now, regards to tempo, don't hurry this piece. Keep it lively but not metronomic. For example, going into bar 9, perhaps try leaning into the note a little. So rather than playing maybe try pulling back a little. And maybe a slight pause going into that bar 13. I would say at the very end of the piece too, a little ritardando is required, or at least nothing too obvious. And don't forget your dynamics here. They will definitely add to the theatrical mood of this piece and give it more character. Now, I mentioned earlier that sometimes these technical problems aren't nearly so obvious when playing a slower piece, but be very aware that when performing under pressurized circumstances, unsure fingering, for example, might become very hazardous. Perhaps you're immune to these difficulties playing in the comfort of your own home, but change the situation to a concert hall with an audience and all manner of interesting issues can pop up. I once heard a saying, the piano student practices until he can play the piece correctly. The concert pianist practices until he can't get it wrong.